Who are the players you're most excited to see in training camp? Who has the most to prove? What are the positions where there are actually spots on the line? And how did we get here? Let's walk back through the spring into the summer to set up Packers training camp 2022.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Today on the show, Lily Zhao is here for another rousing edition of everyone's favorite game. Zhao, you doing? And so we will walk through the offseason. We will walk through what we're excited about with training camp and just generally have fun, because that is what Lily and I do. Before we get to Lily, today's episode brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline is your #1 source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find the latest sports developments, league reviews, news, everything going on in the sports world. BetOnline has it with wagering information, live betting, esports, scores. You want to bet the Packers' future? I just saw a Packers-Bills future bet Super Bowl. If you like the Packers to win the Super Bowl, don't bet them at whatever, 12-1. Bet with the Bills, who are the favorites in the AFC, and get, I think it's 28 or 33-1. Those are odds that now you're getting some real value. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to check on all of your favorite sports. Head to the website or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Once again, we have the honor and the pleasure of asking everyone's favorite question. Lily Zhao from Fox 6 in Milwaukee is with us, which means we have to ask the existential question. Lily, how you doing?
Peter, it is phenomenal to see you. It's been a while. It's the summer. The summer here in Wisconsin has flown by super quickly. But I'm doing well. How you doing?
I'm good. A little sweaty, but you know what? I would rather be a little sweaty than like have my teeth chattering and be shoveling and doing all the things that you have to do in the winter. So we will take it. Before we talk Packers, and we're going to do plenty of that, you and I made a bet with the listeners that for every time we said obviously, we would donate money to charity. So from that count, from that moment that we decided that, I counted 10 obviouslies. So I am personally going to donate for those 10 obviouslies, $100 to Adrian Amos's Alzheimer Research Foundation, and Locked On Packers is going to match it. Anyone else that wants to do that, we would love it. And let us know if you're going to do that. Let's raise some money for charity. I just wanted to get off the top with that. So thank you for being a part of it. Thank you for having the same sort of verbal tics that I do that made that possible. And I just wanted to get that announcement out there.
Yeah, and I would love to donate as well. So we'll talk after the show.
Okay. We'll figure it all out. And anyone else that wants to be a part of this, let us know, and we'll get it all organized there. So I wanted to check in with you because it's been a long off season, and we're in that part of the off season that is the longest, because minicamp very much in the rear view, OTAs even further in the rear view, and now training camp not quite here. And there aren't a ton of position battles for us to like dig into in the nitty gritty. So just let's back up, since we haven't talked all spring. What were the storylines that you were following through OTAs and mini camps that you were really like, okay, I want to see this. I want to figure out this. What's the plan on this? What was catching your attention about the Packers spring?
I think, the big obvious answer is wide receiver. What's that going to look like? And we can talk about it ad nauseum, and they've got a good group of guys coming back in those draft picks. Outside of that, I was looking at, okay, who's going to be protecting Aaron Rodgers up front? The starting five, what's that going to look like? Another big storyline is that defense. I mean, they've really, really put stock in this defense. Aaron Rodgers said it. When you look at it at paper, this defense looks like it's going to be championship caliber. Can it translate on the field? So I just think, is this a defense that can carry this team? Because this offense is kind of in this, not really in this gray area, but there's no Davante Adams. There might be more running back packages that we might see this fall. Is it going to be an offense that has a chip on its shoulder that has to kind of really prove itself this year, where the defense is more solidified? So I just was kind of looking at those overarching storylines, and then Aaron Rodgers and that man bun. If you saw him playing golf this weekend, there was a bet with Charles Barkley. If Rodgers beat Barkley, that man bun's staying, and it is. So having him back, knowing that he's solidified in Green Bay, that part of the team is good. But just in terms of the overarching storylines of can this team be better in all three phases? And speaking of the third phase, Rich Bisaccia, from all intents and purposes, lives up to the fiery guy that I think, a lot of people thought he'd be coming in. So I'm really intrigued to see what that unit looks like as well.
A lot to follow, despite the fact that there isn't a lot of, like I said, position battles to think about. I think there are a lot of interesting things that we can learn in training camp. I did a show a couple of weeks ago about the things that we can actually learn versus the things that we'd like to learn, like who's Aaron Rodgers going to be throwing the ball to. Like, we know the names, but we don't really know the pecking order. When the Davante Adams trade happened, I don't think we've talked on the record since that's happened. Your first reaction was what?
It was, I think I was like a lot of people. It was like, oh my gosh, Davante Adams and the Packers are no longer like together on the same team. Because when I came to Green Bay, that was, I think, his second year in the league. And so it was that year where he struggled, and I saw him, really progress into, the potentially one day Hall of Fame wide receiver that he will be. So it's just weird to say that we won't see him in the green and gold this season on the field. But I will say, just, in terms of getting, having the chance to cover him, he was a great guy with the media. Like, we had a great rapport off the field. So I'm going to miss that for sure as well. So, definitely like, oh, can't believe it happened. But when you look at the reasons of why he wanted to, get traded and why he was, you have to say, okay, it's for his family. He wants to be closer to home, wants to play for a guy he loves in Derek Carr. So I'm fine with it. I know fans, I'm sure now have, settled down more with the decision, but just still stinks that you're going to see him with the Raiders this year in that black uniform.
Yeah. Wash your hands, wash your butt is an all-timer.
Yeah.
And I think that was that the week of the Seahawks game, the playoff game? Was that when he said that?
Yeah, because that was I think so. Yeah, wash your hands.
Every team was sick that playoffs, and then Brian Bulaga got sick and ended up missing the game time decision. We were like, oh my God, wait, Brian Bulaga's not going to play because he's sick?
Yeah. I remember that day vividly though, because remember I was there when he said it, and I was like, that's going to be an all-time quote one day. And it still is. Iconic stuff from Davante Adams, not just iconic on the field, iconic off the field.
I think that's the thing that made it so startling was he had reached that level of anytime receivers on other teams would, be agitated. Anytime there was a story about Odell Beckham Jr. or Antonio Brown, Packer fans would go, oh, thank God we have this guy. And then for it finally to get to that level, you're like, oh, I don't think it undercuts any of that. I think he was the guy that we saw be a professional for, as long as he was. But I think there are going to be some fans who went, were we misled by that? I don't think that that's the case, but I've seen that out there, that people thought that it ended up being kind of an act. And I think that's nonsense. I hope ultimately our remembrance of Davante Adams is that he was a great player in Green Bay who made a decision for himself. And that, the next time we see him on the field, the response will be overwhelmingly positive. When he was talking about wanting to be somewhere else, there was some inferences drawn that this was about Jordan Love and Aaron Rodgers' future in Green Bay. When you saw those comments about wanting to build something and build his legacy and all that stuff, did you immediately think of the Aaron Rodgers succession plan and that it reflected in some way on Jordan Love?
In a way, yeah, because, he had to go and say, I do love Jordan. He's a great person, good player, but, he did reiterate he wants to have a Hall of Fame career, and that's going to come with playing with a, one-day Hall of Fame quarterback. Not saying Jordan Love can't be that. But looking at where Aaron Rodgers is and how many years he has left in the tank, it would behoove Davante, if he wants to keep playing for X amount of years past what Rodgers will be playing to have a solidified quarterback on the field. He had an opportunity with his old college buddy, got a great contract out of it. So you have to believe that, played a part of his decision. And, we know Aaron Rodgers is not going to play for another 10 years. We don't even know if he's going to play past the next 2. So,
or even the next one.
Or the next one, right? So, you have to think that did factor into his decision. And I don't think it was a knock on Jordan Love at all. But, when he's already got a rapport with Derek Carr and you're getting a big contract out west, you're closer to home, it makes a little bit more sense.
It does. All right. We've got fans going, we've been over this. All right, move on. I get it. But this was just my own edification. I wanted to hear your input. And so I'm glad we were able to do that. As we look forward to training camp, I gave a list of players that I was really excited to see, guys I wanted to see with the pads on, because that's a big difference. When we finally get to see these guys, camp opens in, less than 2 weeks now. Who are the players or player you are most excited to see and say, okay, let me get a glimpse of what this guy looks like in person?
I'm probably going to give some obvious answers.
That's okay.
But I think it's warranted because they were drafted high for a reason. You want to see what the Packers got in their draft picks. So a Christian Watson, even a Samori Toure, the 7th rounder who Aaron Rodgers gave a lot of praise to a couple days ago.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys, Quay Walker, Davante Wyatt, what can those guys do, especially guys on the defensive end with the pads on? Because you were drafted high for a reason. Can you produce? And I think, it'll be interesting to see how a Christian Watson does do, because he's got the size, he's got the speed. Can he really pick up this NFL offense? I think it's going to be really fun to see him with Rodgers and kind of trying to learn that playbook and learn from guys like Allen and Randall. I think those top pick guys are the ones I'm looking at because they're drafted that high for a reason. Can they produce? On the offensive line, I love a Sean Ryan. The hair, he just embodies a Packers offensive lineman. I want to see what he can do. Can he play all 5 positions? Can he, body some of these defensive linemen? Those position battles in the trenches is going to be fun to watch.
This is going to be controversial. There is a battle on the Packers for who has the biggest thighs, because Sean Ryan is a massive lower body human being. He is bootylicious. And AJ Dillon is going to have something to say because he looks somehow even bigger. He looks even thicker with like 3 C's, but Sean Ryan's lower body is incredibly big. I'm so glad you mentioned Sean Ryan, who I'm very excited to see as well. Very excited to see it. Family night, very excited to see in the preseason. We don't get to know anything about offensive and defensive linemen in mini camps. There's like next to nothing to be gleaned because the pads aren't on. So I'm so glad that was a name that you brought up. Zach Cruz over at Packers Wire had an interesting article the other day about players with the most to prove. And I put together a list that was sort of similar, guys who might be in battles for their jobs. Are there guys that you think are really feeling the pressure this year to either perform because they want a contract, perform because someone was just drafted, or perform because their legacy's on the line? I'm thinking in particular someone like Aaron Rodgers. Like I think quietly there's a lot of pressure on Aaron Rodgers this year to perform.
Yeah, I agree with you there because, again, when you look at the drought between their last Super Bowl, it's been a decade plus. He wants to get back, signs a massive contract. This team is investing in special teams and defense. This is the perfect year to get them there if they can just get over that hump. Outside of Aaron Rodgers, who I know, always comes in and they want to win every game, I do believe a guy like, if you're looking on offense, like Josiah DeGuara, I think he's got a lot to prove. The tight end's a very big position. You got to know how to block, and without Robert Tonyan and whenever he does come back, there's going to be that void at tight end of, outside of Mercedes Lewis of, can Josiah DeGuara learn this playbook, be comfortable on the field, and have Aaron Rodgers trust him? We've seen him make some really good plays, and there's just like some inconsistency there. So I think he's got a lot to prove this season in terms of saying, I can stay on the field consistently and make these plays for the offense. And then I think, looking defensively at Darnell Savage, I know he's had a really good, end to the season, but, can he produce as well? Because that defensive back group is, I think, stacked. So can he prove himself as well? I think he's going to be a guy to look at. But It's going to be really fun to see because, it's not a bad problem to have talking about talented guys trying to prove themselves versus I don't know if we have any talent on this team. So I think it's going to be fun.
It is a champagne problem for sure to say, okay, well, which of these good guys can be great, or which of these guys who has a lot of talent can really manifest that talent into something on the field. By the way, Darnell Savage, Josiah DeGuara, both on Zach's list. So I don't know that Savage would be on my list only because I think he's shown me enough. I think he's going to get the contract. I think they're going to extend him and do all that stuff. But what I will agree with is if he plays well, this defense is going to be like one of the 5 best defenses in the league. Like if Darnell Savage, I think he's the X factor of this defense. If he plays well, there is no limit to how good this defense can be from a talent standpoint. So I'm really excited to see that. Lily, let me get you out of here on this. You've been doing some traveling this summer.
Yep.
We check in with you. You are our culinary correspondent in a way. So what have you eaten lately that you have really enjoyed, that you've really liked? We see the Instagram posts, some beautiful locations, and also Milwaukee. There's some good food in Milwaukee. So let me know what have you had recently that you've liked?
Oh, that's a great question, Peter. I had some. Have you ever heard of? I don't know if I'm saying this correctly. It's aguachile. Aguachile.
I have heard of it, but I've never had it.
Phenomenal. It's like a ceviche kind of dish where it's shrimp and there's like chili sauce. I had that. It was phenomenal.
Sounds wonderful.
Sounds delish. I haven't really had anything out of the box outside of that. Well, that's not really out of the box, but had some good tacos. I've had a grilled lobster, which, come on. I mean, I was going to go all out and have a grilled lobster. It was phenomenal. What else have I had? Some good, just good steak. Because when it's the summer, you got to grill.
Listen, I'm making steak tonight. So you are preaching to the choir on that one. That was one of the first things, Suburban Dad Peter, one of the first things I needed to do was remaster the grill. I had, gotten some meager chops. I worked at Ozaki Country Club for a summer in the kitchen, and I was making a lot of stuff there, but I had to get the ribs down. I had to get the barbecue chicken down. I had to do the steak. Now my next step is okay, I got to figure out the smoker thing. I want to make brisket. I want to make pulled pork. I want to do all that stuff. I haven't even attempted to do that. So anyone out there, if you have recommendations on products, on recipes, on things I need to try to make, please hit us up on YouTube. Hit us in the comments, on Twitter, wherever. And Lily, we will have you back very soon. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Peter.
All right, I want to thank Lily for joining the show. Awesome, as always, to be with her. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing number of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts that you need. So why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questions and wait while the person behind the counter gives you answers on only the parts that they have in their warehouse? You have a computer with access to Rock Auto at home and in your pocket. So why choose to spend 30%, 50%, even 100% more from a chain store or car dealership? For example, Honda Odyssey fuel pump, $353 at a chain store. It's $216 on Rock Auto. Who couldn't use an extra some odd $100? Why would you just throw it away when you don't have to? Rock Auto can just save you the money. Go to rockauto.com and see all the parts available for your car or truck and write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. And thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen. Now go make your second listen Locked On NFL. Our national NFL experts and insiders keep fans dialed in with the biggest stories and the latest news from around the league, because an offseason doesn't equal a break in the action. All right, we're going to be back tomorrow. We're back at it. This is go time now. Every day we will have a show for you. Yes, we will be breathlessly going through all of the news out of training camp, trying to parse what's going on, what's happening. Are the Packers going to make another signing? Unfortunately, there will inevitably be injuries. We will talk through all of it. Who are we excited to see? Who's impressing? Who is disappointing? All of that is coming up. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers. Subscribe on YouTube. Like us on YouTube. And The Leap is back too. So go subscribe to The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. And anytime you want to hit us up on the Locked On Packers fan hotline, you can do that, 920-341-3775, to stay Locked On Packers.